I'm Rachel Donnelly, 35, and until 6 weeks ago, I was the engineering director at my family's firm, Donnelly Precision Systems, based in Des Moines, Iowa. For over a decade, I gave everything I had to that company. I sacrificed holidays, worked through illness, and led innovation that turned us into a regional leader in automated agriculture solutions. But none of that mattered when my mother looked me in the eye at our quarterly board meeting and said, "You're simply too expensive." My father sat beside her silent. My younger brother Aaron, newly appointed to strategic operations, delivered the killing blow with a smirk. "For your salary, we could bring on a whole team of juniors," he said casually, flipping to a budget slide. "It's just business." I didn't say a word. I packed up my office that same afternoon. The same office I'd built from scratch with blueprints still pinned to the corkboard and awards tucked in drawers I never thought I'd empty. What I didn't expect: the desperate phone calls would start within 2 weeks. Before I continue, where are you watching from today? Hit like and subscribe if you've ever given your all only to be pushed aside by your own family. Back when I graduated from Carnegie Mellon at 22, I had job offers from Amazon Robotics, Lockheed Martin, and Tesla. But I didn't hesitate. My grandfather founded Donnelly Precision in the 1960s out of a barn on our farm. My dad took it from outdated machinery to cutting-edge automation. I wanted to help build the future. I started in the trenches field, testing prototypes, handling maintenance calls, running late-night simulations. My father promised no special treatment, and he kept that promise. For 3 years, I earned respect the hard way. By year 5, I was leading design on our smart irrigation systems. 2 years later, I became the youngest engineering manager in company history. I turned a struggling department into a streamlined unit known for fast, efficient turnaround and rock-solid reliability. My proudest moment came when I landed the Mid-Plains distribution contract, a multi-million-dollar deal that gave us our first major national footprint. I negotiated every term, supervised the engineering rollout, and resolved critical failures that saved us from penalties. That one deal paid my salary 10 times over. I thought that loyalty, performance, and legacy would mean something. But legacy, it turns out, doesn't stand a chance when short-term savings are on the line. They wanted cheaper. So they fired the person who built the backbone of their operations. They didn't realize that firing me also meant losing key client relationships, vendor trust, and half the engineering team who left within a month. Now Aaron's calling daily. They're begging for help, offering consulting rates and reconciliation talks. Let's just say I've learned that sometimes the best revenge is success, served cold with a signed contract from your biggest competitor. And I'm just getting started. After leaving my family's company, I took time to breathe, but not to rest. I quietly began consulting with Plains Tech Agri-Solutions, a growing Midwestern competitor based in Omaha, Nebraska. I spent 3 months analyzing their workflows, identifying outdated systems, and designing a customized automation upgrade projected to boost output by 30%. When I presented my proposal to their executive team, the response was immediate and unanimous. They signed me that same afternoon, canceling meetings with 2 larger firms. That night, their CEO took me to dinner and toasted to the future of innovation. I couldn't help but think back to the night my dad once said nearly the same thing. We were at a quiet steakhouse in Des Moines, just the 2 of us, after I'd secured our Westbrook manufacturing deal. He raised his glass with pride. "You're the future of this company, Rachel. This will all be your legacy." We stayed past closing drawing plans for expansion on napkins. It was the closest we'd ever been. Everything shifted when Aaron, my younger brother, joined the company 3 years ago. Fresh from completing his MBA at Northwestern, he swooped in with flashy PowerPoints and a head full of corporate buzzwords. While I'd spent years on the ground building trust with clients and employees, Aaron sold our parents on the idea that we needed modern strategies to stay competitive. At first, I was open. I figured my engineering background and his business mind could work in harmony. Dad seemed thrilled to have both his kids on board. Mom, who always favored Aaron, lit up every time he entered a room. The Donnelly Dream Team, Dad had called us at Aaron's welcome dinner, but the dynamic shifted fast. In team meetings, Mom started turning to Aaron after I spoke, asking, "What's your take on that?" Aaron's dad began nodding more to her than offering his own thoughts, his years of engineering experience increasingly dismissed in favor of Aaron's data models and profit forecasts. Still, I kept pushing forward. I focused on delivering results, maintaining team morale, and ensuring client satisfaction stayed high. I believed that performance would eventually silence the politics. I was wrong. 6 months after Aaron joined, I proposed a bold new direction, adapting our technology for renewable energy systems. It was a smart pivot with minimal cost and maximum long-term potential. I spent weeks compiling research, running simulations, and crafting a strategy. But when I finished presenting, silence followed. Mom finally said, "That's an interesting angle." "Aaron, didn't you mention something similar in your report last month?" Aaron nodded smoothly. "Yes, I've been exploring renewables too. With some tweaks, I think we can rework Rachel's idea to fit our growth goals." I sat frozen. My vision had just been co-opted and diluted right in front of me. Dad said nothing. Still, I kept going. When the Anderson Systems contract came up for bid, I threw myself into the proposal, working nights and weekends. I had no idea it would be my last. Anderson Systems was the biggest opportunity Donnelly Precision had ever landed. Their project aligned seamlessly with our core engineering strengths: custom automation for large-scale agricultural logistics. I led every phase of the pitch, from technical schematics to performance simulations to integration timelines. After weeks of intense review, we won the contract. It should have been the highlight of my career. But at the announcement meeting, my mother framed the victory as a collective effort. "It was Rachel's leadership," she said briefly. "But let's not forget Aaron's financial modeling that made our bid truly competitive." The reality? Aaron had submitted a basic pricing sheet that I'd spent 2 late nights overhauling for accuracy. I bit my tongue. Then the Anderson team specifically mentioned our engineering blueprint as their deciding factor. My blueprint? Without missing a beat, my mother smiled and said, "Rachel and Aaron really make an incredible sibling team." I clenched my jaw. A week later, I found out Aaron had been assigned as the primary liaison for the Anderson account, the same account I had brought through the door. When I asked why, my mother waved me off. "Aaron understands the business narrative. Clients need to see our strategic vision, not just technical specs." Suddenly, my department was under scrutiny. Budget approvals dragged on for weeks. Equipment updates were shelved even though machines were aging past safe thresholds. Positions we'd planned to fill remained frozen, despite a workload spike from Anderson's onboarding demands. Meanwhile, Aaron was greenlit to expand the sales and marketing teams, no questions asked. His new hires arrived within days, their onboarding paperwork prioritized over mine. At a family dinner, I stepped into the hallway and overheard my mother and Aaron murmuring about necessary restructuring. When they saw me, their conversation died instantly. That night, Mom barely acknowledged me, gushing instead over Aaron's golf tournament win. A few days later, during a tense engineering review, Marcus Johnson, our senior electrical engineer and one of my closest allies, pulled me aside. "Something's shifting, Rachel," he said quietly. "There's talk of reorganizing the whole department. Everyone's on edge." I tried to stay grounded. "It's probably just the usual budget crunch," I told him. "Once Anderson systems are live, the pressure will ease." But the next week, I noticed our engineering team had lost access to project management folders. When I asked the IT manager, he looked uncomfortable. "It came from above," he said simply. Later that day, I passed Aaron leaving my father's office practically glowing with satisfaction. I tried calling Dad that evening. He answered, but his tone was cold. "Not a good time, Rach. Let's talk next week at work." In 12 years, he'd never once said he was too busy for me. At our monthly family brunch, I expected normalcy. Instead, my mother raved about Aaron's recent boardroom presentation, one I hadn't even known about. I felt the shift hard that day. I wasn't just being sidelined. I was being erased. When I asked my mother why I hadn't been invited to the board presentation, she offered a vague reply about confidential business planning, then swiftly changed the subject to a new marketing initiative Aaron had suggested. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe them all. After all, I had built my life around Donnelly Precision Systems. The company's growth had been my mission, its clients, my responsibility. My engineering team respected my leadership, and our reputation in the industry was solid because of years of consistent performance. Surely my family saw that. Surely they still believed in me. So I doubled down. I buried my instincts and worked harder. I personally managed every detail of the Anderson Systems implementation. I verified specs, improved timelines, and solved issues before they could escalate. I logged every success, documented every fix, and continued attending meetings with a forced optimism. I never once confronted Aaron. I told myself it would all blow over. Looking back, I see now I was in denial. Late Thursday afternoon, a calendar invite appeared in my inbox. Subject line, strategic planning discussion. No agenda, just 4 attendees, my parents Aaron and me. Scheduled for Friday at 4 p.m. in the main conference room. I stared at it. End-of-week meetings were rare in our company culture. I had a sinking feeling, but I pushed it aside. I prepared a summary of current engineering projects, hoping to demonstrate the department's continued value. When I walked into the conference room, I knew. My mother sat at the head of the table, a position my father had always held. Aaron and my father flanked her, their expressions unreadable. The symbolism hit like a punch. "Rachel, thank you for joining us," my mother said, voice flat and formal. She wore her sharpest blazer and looked like she was addressing a stranger. "We've been reviewing our operational structure and cost efficiency measures." My father kept his gaze on his folded hands. His usual warmth had vanished. Aaron sat upright, his leather folio open, a pen, poised, the edges of a smile dancing on his lips. "The business landscape is changing rapidly." My mother continued reading from what was clearly a rehearsed script. "Donnelly Precision must evolve to stay competitive. After thorough evaluation of our financials and projected needs, we've decided that a structural adjustment is necessary." I nodded slowly, trying to process. I've actually been working on process improvements for the engineering team I offered. "I'd love to present my ideas. Some of the changes might align with what you're planning." My mother didn't blink. "That won't be necessary, Rachel. The board has already made its decision." For a split second, I still didn't understand. And then I did. This wasn't a consultation. It was a dismissal. They weren't restructuring the company. They were restructuring me out of it. The board now consisted of my mother, my father, and Aaron, the 3 of them sitting across from me like a tribunal. Aaron took over with smooth confidence, sliding a color-coded report across the table toward me. "If you look at the numbers," "Rachel," he said, standing to gesture toward a chart on the monitor, "they tell a very clear story." The first slide was a bar graph comparing departmental costs. Engineering salaries make up the company's largest overhead, and your role in particular is the most significant individual expense. He clicked to the next slide, a pie chart with my salary visually carved out as its own separate wedge labeled in bold red. "Your current compensation package, including benefits, could cover the salaries of 3 junior engineers who statistically can deliver more overall output." I blinked, stunned. This wasn't about efficiency. This wasn't about streamlining or reorganization. This was about me. "We're eliminating the engineering director role effective immediately," my mother said coldly. "The responsibilities will be redistributed to a lower-cost management structure, reporting directly to Aaron in his new role as Chief Operating Officer." I turned to my father, searching his face for something. Anything. Recognition, support, resistance. He met my gaze for a moment, then looked away. "Dad?" My voice caught. "Do you agree with this?" He hesitated, then spoke without looking up. "The numbers make sense, Rachel. It's a business decision." Aaron sat again, calm as ever, flipping a tab in his leather folder. "We've prepared a generous severance package, 6 months' salary, continued health care, all remaining vacation time. Legal has everything ready." He slid a packet toward me, neatly labeled with my name. I stared at it, the weight of betrayal settling in my chest. While I was working weekends to launch the Anderson project, they had been working with attorneys to push me out. "But the Anderson rollout starts next month," I said, my voice low but steady. They asked for me specifically. I designed every core system. They expect me to oversee implementation. We'll handle the transition, Aaron replied, almost bored. I've been shadowing you, as you know. I have detailed notes on the system architecture. I nearly laughed. Aaron had attended 2 meetings, spent most of them on his phone, and afterward asked me to summarize the technical stuff because he was too busy focusing on client relations. This is a mistake, I said, sitting taller. My team respects me. Our clients trust me. I've brought in record contracts. I've worked harder than anyone in this room. I've given 12 years of my life to this company. My mother's expression didn't change. Aaron began stacking his presentation slides. My father just folded his hands tighter. I realized then this wasn't about logic. It was about power. And they'd already decided who belonged and who didn't. My mother's expression sharpened, lips pressed into a line. This kind of emotional appeal is exactly why Donnelly Precision needs more objective leadership, Rachel. Business decisions can't be made based on sentimentality. Sentimentality? I repeated, stunned. Is that what you call 12 years of performance, the Mid-Plains contract, the Anderson launch, the industry recognition our team has earned? Aaron chimed in smoothly, his tone coated in false reassurance. Those are all accomplishments we respect. But the company has to evolve. It's basic resource allocation. He tapped his pen against the spreadsheet. 3 junior engineers for the cost of 1 director. It's nothing personal, Rachel. Just the numbers. The casual cruelty of his words, delivered with that polished MBA smile, hit harder than anything else. That was the moment I saw it clearly. This wasn't about cutting costs. It was about cutting me out. I stood slowly, forcing myself to breathe through the sting. If I couldn't win, I would leave with whatever pride I had left. I assume you'll want me out of my office today. My mother nodded once. HR has already prepared boxes for your personal belongings. Your system access has been restricted. Of course it had. They hadn't even considered the possibility that I might challenge them. I reached for the severance packet without opening it. I'll have my attorney review this, I said quietly. As I turned to leave, Aaron's voice followed me. We'll need your building access card before you go. I turned back briefly, taking one last look at the 3 of them. Aaron smug and victorious, my mother, cold and calculated, and my father, silent. The man who once called me the company's future now stared at his hands like a scolded child. Congratulations on your restructuring, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I hope it brings you everything you deserve. The walk back to my office felt surreal, as if I were watching myself from somewhere else. The familiar halls of Donnelly Precision had never felt so alien. Coworkers glanced at me with uncertain expressions, sensing something had shifted, but unsure what to say. When I reached my office, the door still bore the plaque, Rachel Donnelly, Director of Engineering. It looked almost defiant, like a relic refusing to be erased. Inside cardboard boxes sat waiting on my desk, and a nervous HR assistant lingered in the corner. She looked barely out of college. I can give you some privacy, she offered gently. Thank you, I managed. My voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. Word had already spread. Before I could begin packing, Marcus appeared in my doorway, eyes wide with disbelief. His voice cracked as he spoke. Is it true? I nodded slowly. He stepped inside, lowering his voice. Rachel, they can't do this. They shouldn't do this. I forced a sad smile. They already have. The Anderson implementation is only weeks away, Marcus said, disbelief lacing his voice. The team won't accept this. I didn't look up. I continued methodically emptying my desk. Framed family photos. Technical notebooks. The Industry Innovator Award I'd received 2 years ago. Every item I packed felt like a piece of myself I'd once believed had value, now reduced to memories boxed in cardboard. It's done, Marcus, I said quietly. Effective immediately. Aaron's taking over. Aaron, he repeated, barely containing his disgust. He couldn't diagram a power relay if his life depended on it. This is insane. By then, several members of my team had gathered outside my door. Their faces told the story: shock, confusion, heartbreak. Jessica Chin, our gifted systems architect, stood with red-rimmed eyes. She looked more devastated than I felt. These people weren't just coworkers. They were my community, my day-to-day reason for showing up and giving my best. They had been more of a family to me than the ones who'd shared my last name. I appreciate all of you, I told them, standing straighter even as my heart splintered. It's been an honor leading this team. Please keep doing the incredible work you're known for. Marcus insisted on helping me carry the boxes. In the parking lot, away from the hushed glances and silent goodbyes, my composure cracked. I leaned against my car, breath catching, and then it all broke loose, a raw, gasping sob. "This isn't the end," Rachel Marcus said, patting my shoulder in the most awkward, sincere way possible. "You're the best engineer I've ever worked with. Any company would be lucky to have you." 12 years, I whispered, hugging one of the boxes. 12 years. For nothing. The drive home was a blur. Stoplights passed, cars swerved, but I barely saw them. All I could see was Aaron's smirk. All I could hear was his voice. 3 junior engineers for the cost of 1 director. When I stepped into my apartment, it felt unfamiliar. I'd spent more time at the office than I ever had in this space. My walls were bare. My fridge was empty. The silence was suffocating. No partner. No pets. No friends outside of work. I had built my entire world around Donnelly Precision, and they had cut me out like an unwanted tumor. I didn't leave my apartment the entire weekend. Messages flooded in, texts from team members, emails from contacts in the industry who had already caught wind of my departure. I ignored them all. I didn't have the words, the energy, or the courage to admit how hollow I felt. Then, on Sunday evening, my phone lit up with a new notification, one that twisted the knife deeper. Aaron Donnelly, named COO of Donnelly Precision, leads major leadership restructure. A press release. My erasure was now public. A calendar alert pinged on my phone. Weekly family dinner at 6. For years, I'd attended without fail, often arriving early to help set the table or bring Dad's favorite dessert from the bakery near the office. But now, minutes after the reminder, a text from my mother appeared. "Given current circumstances, it's probably best to skip dinner tonight." No call, no explanation, just a curt message, removing me from another piece of my life. Monday morning came too bright. Sunlight streamed through the blinds. I hadn't bothered to close the light, too cheerful for the weight pressing on my chest. For the first time in 12 years, I had no meetings, no code reviews, no team waiting for me to set the direction. It was like the laws of my world had shifted, like gravity had gone missing. Eventually, I opened my laptop, my fingers hesitating over the keys. There it was, an email from Donnelly Precision's HR department. "Please return the signed severance agreement by Wednesday." The letterhead made me flinch. I had helped design that logo. I remembered sketching drafts on graph paper at my dining table. It had once represented pride. Now it looked like a stamp of exile. Buried beneath HR notices were messages from former teammates. Jessica had written, "The team is stunned. Aaron called a meeting and said he's taking over Anderson. He couldn't answer basic architecture questions. Everyone's frustrated and scared." A tiny part of me felt validated, but mostly I felt sad. I had poured myself into that project and that company, not for recognition, but because I believed in what we were building. On Tuesday, desperation cracked through my pride. I called my father's private number, the one he'd always told me was for anything important. It rang 4 times before sending me to voicemail. "Dad? It's Rachel," I said softly. "I think we need to talk about this decision. The Anderson account needs someone who understands the system. Maybe there's a compromise." My voice caught. "Please call me back." He never did. By evening, my hands trembled as I opened the severance packet. Just like Aaron promised, 6 months' salary, extended health insurance. But one clause stopped me cold, an 18-month non-compete agreement. Not only had they removed me from the company, they wanted to keep me out of the entire industry. That night, I sat at my kitchen counter with a calculator and a notepad. Between my modest savings and the severance package, I had enough to live carefully for about a year. It should have given me relief. Instead, it made the emptiness sharper. I'd been so sure of my role, so secure in my standing, that I'd never created a backup plan, never imagined needing one. And the hardest part, trying to define myself without the company. For 12 years, I had been Rachel Donnelly, Director of Engineering at Donnelly Precision. Now, I was just Rachel. And I didn't know what that meant. On Wednesday, someone from the family finally broke the silence. My Aunt Valerie, Dad's younger sister, called unexpectedly. She'd always kept a respectful distance from Donnelly Precision, never involved in board meetings or business decisions. I heard what happened, she said the moment I picked up. It's unthinkable, Rachel. What your parents and Aaron did, it's a disgrace. Did Dad ask you to check in on me? I asked, a flicker of hope pushing through the numbness. There was a pause. No, sweetheart. I don't think he even knows I'm calling. The ache in my chest deepened. That quiet confirmation hit harder than the severance notice. My parents hadn't just fired me, they had surgically removed me from the family itself. I didn't sign the agreement by Wednesday's deadline. Instead, I forwarded it to an employment lawyer, a referral from a former classmate at Carnegie Mellon. His response was direct. While the firing was technically legal under Iowa's at-will laws, the non-compete clause was likely unenforceable given how broadly it was written and the nature of my dismissal. Don't rush to sue, he advised. Negotiate first. They may be more flexible than you think. By the end of that dreadful week, the emotional fog began to thin. In its place came something I hadn't expected: clarity. For over a decade, I had let Donnelly Precision define my identity. My worth was tethered to that office, that title, that legacy. But if they couldn't see what I brought to the table, maybe it was time to build a new one on my terms. 2 weeks passed in a haze of job boards, financial planning, and sleepless nights. Then, late one afternoon, my phone lit up with Dad on the screen. I froze. Let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I answered. Rachel, he said, his voice uncertain. How are you? Really, I said flat. That's how you want to start this. He cleared his throat. I'm calling about the Anderson specs. The team is struggling to interpret your documentation. Of course. Not a call to apologize. Not to explain or reconnect. Just another problem that needed fixing. I let the silence stretch. The implementation deadline's closing in, he added, almost sheepish. Aaron thought maybe you could clarify a few things. Aaron? I repeated, biting back a laugh. You mean the same Aaron who studied the architecture and replaced me? Rachel, please. This is business. Exactly what you said the day you fired me. Nothing personal, just business. Eventually, I agreed on one condition: that he'd revisit the non-compete clause. After a pause, he reluctantly agreed. I walked him through the basics. Any competent engineer should have understood my system layout. But as he fumbled with terminology and struggled to follow, it became obvious. They weren't just floundering. They were in over their heads. If you've ever had to rebuild after being cast aside by the very people who should have stood by you, hit subscribe, because what happened next in my story will leave you speechless. Aaron was completely out of his depth. The next afternoon, Jessica called during her lunch break, her voice hushed. It's chaos here, she whispered. Aaron tried presenting the Anderson implementation plan to the team this morning. He couldn't answer the most basic questions about load balancing or failover protocols. Marcus had to step in just to keep the meeting from imploding. I kept my tone neutral, though inside I already knew. How are the rest of the preparations going? We're behind, she admitted. Aaron keeps changing system requirements based on cost instead of performance. The test environment crashed twice yesterday because he approved configuration changes without understanding their consequences. In the days that followed, I heard similar reports. Marcus vented on a late-night call about equipment requests being denied for budget reasons. Another engineer texted that Aaron had arbitrarily shortened the QA phase to meet his made-up deadlines. 12 years of careful quality standards thrown out in a month. 3 weeks after my dismissal, Jessica asked if I'd meet her for coffee. The moment she walked into the cafe, I could see it: dark circles under her eyes, shoulders slumped. The Anderson demonstration is next week, she said absently, stirring her coffee. We're nowhere near ready. Integration points are unstable. The UI's full of bugs. And Aaron? She shook her head. He refuses to acknowledge any of it. I leaned in. What's my dad saying? Jessica's face softened. That's the other issue. He's just not there. He comes in, sits in meetings, but he's checked out. He doesn't contribute. It's like he's surrendered. That landed harder than I expected. For all his failures, my father had always been invested in the company's technical backbone. To hear he was disengaged, it wasn't like him. 4 days later, my phone rang. This time, the caller ID made me pause. It was my mother. Rachel. She began curtly, skipping any pleasantries. I understand you've been speaking with current employees about ongoing projects. Hello to you too, Mom, I said flatly. I've heard from multiple people that you've been discussing sensitive company information. I've caught up with friends, I replied coolly. Didn't realize friendship violated corporate policy. There was a long pause. I could practically hear her recalculating. The Anderson demonstration has been postponed, she said eventually. Aaron mentioned you provided clarification to your father about certain specs. Dad called me? I replied. He had questions. My mother exhaled tightly, the silence between us thick with implication. If you've ever been pushed aside by your own family, only to watch them falter without you hit subscribe, because what happened next didn't just shift the company's future, it changed mine forever. I answered their questions. That's all I said calmly. There was another pause on the line. Would you be willing to consult on the project, my mother asked? Just until implementation is complete, we'd of course arrange appropriate compensation. The audacity of it made me laugh. A sharp, humorless sound. Let me get this straight, I said. You fired me for being too expensive, and now you want to hire me back to clean up the mess you made by replacing me. This is a professional courtesy request. Rachel, she replied. Her tone clipped. The success of this project affects people you worked with for years. She wasn't wrong. I did care about the team. I cared about the integrity of the work we had done. But coming back as a consultant would only reinforce the narrative that I was disposable, useful only when things fell apart. I'm afraid I'm unavailable for consulting work at this time, I said evenly. Perhaps one of your 3 junior engineers can help. I ended the call. The next day, Marcus called, his voice buzzing with urgency. It was a disaster, he said flatly. The Anderson demo. The system crashed within minutes. Core features failed and the client reps walked out halfway through. He paused. Aaron tried to blame the engineering team, said we didn't follow his directions. I sighed. Classic. But get this. The client CTO specifically asked why you weren't there. Marcus continued. Said the only reason they signed with Donnelly was because of your work. That night, my phone filled with voicemails. 3 in total, all from my father. The first was stiff and formal. Rachel, we need to talk about Anderson. The second sounded more anxious. I know things got off track. We need your input. The third, barely a whisper. Rachel? The company is in trouble. Please call me back. I didn't. Instead, I met with Marcus the following day. He'd taken a rare personal day and invited me over. His apartment was cluttered with parts of a drone project he'd never finished. I can't do this anymore, he said, pacing the room. Aaron is destroying everything we built. Your mother rubber stamps his decisions without even asking questions. How bad is it, I asked. 4 engineers have already quit. Jessica's on the edge. Morale is shot. And the Anderson contract. They've given us 2 weeks, he said, stopping to look at me. 2 weeks to deliver a working system, or they're pulling the plug and suing for breach. His eyes locked on mine. Rachel, this isn't just about you anymore. The whole company's on the line. A bitter part of me, the part still wounded, thought maybe they deserved it. But then I pictured Jessica, Marcus, the interns who had once looked to me for guidance. The clients who relied on our systems to keep their businesses running? What do you think I should do? I asked quietly. Marcus didn't hesitate. Nothing. At least nothing that helps them directly. He sat across from me, elbows on his knees, voice low, but urgent. I think you should start your own company. Marcus's words hung in the air like electricity, equal parts terrifying and thrilling. Start my own company. The thought had flickered through my mind on sleepless nights, a faint ember I never dared fan into flame. But hearing it out loud from someone who knew the business as intimately as I did made it suddenly feel real. Possible. I'm serious, Marcus said, eyes lit with a spark I hadn't seen since before my firing. You've got the experience, the network. And now you've got the motivation. And what about capital? I asked cautiously. Client's office space. Infrastructure Donnelly Precision took decades to build. You wouldn't be starting from scratch, he said firmly. You'd be starting from experience, from credibility, from the reputation they foolishly threw away. Over the next few days, the idea began to take root. I drafted spreadsheets, projected costs, growth models, competitive positioning. I combed through small business resources and spoke with a business attorney who confirmed my unsigned severance agreement left me legally unbound by the non-compete. When I shared the idea with Jessica over coffee, she didn't hesitate. I'd follow you in a heartbeat, she said, eyes fierce. And I'm not the only one. Half the department would come with me if you opened the door. I can't hire everyone, I said carefully. Not at first. Then hire the best, she replied. A small, tight team can make waves fast. She leaned in, voice dropping. The Anderson mess isn't isolated. Henderson's project is up for bid in 3 weeks, and they're second-guessing working with Donnelly. Words getting around. Henderson Industrial Systems. The name lit something in me. I'd spent years nurturing that relationship, waiting for the right opportunity. Their upcoming automation overhaul would be complex, high stakes, exactly the kind of challenge my team was built for. That night, I made a call that would change the trajectory of everything. Alexandra Reed. We'd met at MIT and crossed paths at tech conferences over the years. She was now a venture capitalist in Boston, known for investing in engineering startups with bold ideas and big vision. When she answered, her voice was warm. Rachel Donnelly. This is a surprise. I didn't waste time. I laid it all out, my firing, the company chaos, the opportunity I saw forming from the wreckage. Alexandra didn't offer comfort. She asked questions, sharp ones, about market gaps, differentiation, client leads, growth strategy. After an hour, she said, "Send me a business plan by Monday." Then she paused. "This has potential, Rachel. Real potential." And just like that, what had started as a nightmare began to feel like something else entirely. A beginning. Significant potential. That phrase echoed in my mind as the weekend passed in a blur of market research, cost projections, and late-night strategy sessions. By Sunday evening, I'd completed a 30-page business plan outlining my vision for Donnelly Tech Systems, a name I chose deliberately, honoring my surname but reclaiming it on my own terms. Alexandra's response arrived Tuesday morning. "Let's meet. I'm prepared to discuss an initial investment of $1.5 million for a 20% equity stake." The figure stunned me. It was more than enough to lease a modest office space, secure equipment, and cover salaries for a small team during our launch. But more than that, it was validation from someone whose business instincts I trusted implicitly. Within 2 weeks, I signed a lease on a small industrial-style office suite across town from Donnelly Precision. The place needed fresh paint and wiring updates, but it had potential just like us. Gritty, functional, and full of purpose. Marcus was the first to officially come on board, tendering his resignation with a notice period timed to end just as our office would be operational. Jessica followed a week later. Within a month, 5 core members of my old team had quietly committed to joining Donnelly Tech Systems once their transitions were complete. A short article ran in the local business journal. Former Donnelly Precision Director Rachel Donnelly launches engineering firm bringing over a decade of industry experience. It was a brief write-up, but it landed where it needed to. 2 days later, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional. "Miss Donnelly, this is William Henderson. I've followed your work for a while now. Your solutions for Westbrook Manufacturing in particular made a strong impression. I understand you've started your own firm." "That's correct, Mr. Henderson," I said, trying to sound composed while my heart pounded. "We're currently accepting bids for our upcoming automation initiative. Given recent concerns about Donnelly Precision, we've widened our candidate pool. Would your firm be interested in submitting a proposal? My pulse quickened. This was the kind of opportunity we needed: high profile, high impact, and high stakes. Yes, we'd be honored to submit, I replied. What's the submission deadline? 3 weeks from this Friday, he said. Then added almost apologetically, I should mention Donnelly. Precision will also be bidding. I hope that doesn't pose a conflict. Not at all, I answered calmly, though the idea of competing against my family so soon turned my stomach in knots. We'll focus on building the best possible solution for Henderson Industrial. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind. We were still assembling desks, connecting servers, and wiring network cables, all while drafting the most critical proposal of our lives. Every waking hour became Henderson-focused. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. Working late nights and weekends, Marcus, Jessica, and I poured everything we had into the Henderson proposal. Jessica used up vacation days to contribute while Marcus worked through weekends without complaint. Together, we crafted a revolutionary approach that went far beyond traditional automation strategies. Instead of merely optimizing Henderson's existing systems, a route Donnelly Precision would almost certainly take, we developed a predictive maintenance solution using machine learning algorithms. Our system would anticipate equipment failures before they happened, reducing costly downtime and extending machinery lifespan. The potential savings were substantial. But even more importantly, the technical innovation would place Henderson at the leading edge of smart manufacturing. The night before the submission deadline, as we polished the final documents, Marcus leaned back from his laptop with a look of quiet wonder. "Do you realize what we've built in just a few weeks?" he asked. Jessica looked up and smiled. "This proposal is more cutting edge than anything we worked on at Donnelly Precision in the past 2 years." I nodded, feeling it too. There's something different about how we're working now. Freer, more inventive. And it was true. Without Aaron's obsession with cost slashing and my mother's aversion to risk, we had room to breathe, to explore, to innovate. For the first time in years, the work felt exciting, like it had back when I was fresh out of Carnegie Mellon. And the world of engineering still felt wide open. We submitted the proposal first thing the next morning, then celebrated with a bottle of champagne in our half-furnished office, folding chairs, mismatched mugs, wires still poking out of the walls. Whether we won or not, we had proven something important to ourselves. Donnelly Tech Systems wasn't just a name, it was a force. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. William Henderson's voice was warm but direct. "Ms. Donnelly?" He said, "We're awarding you the contract." I sat in stunned silence as he continued. "Your team's proposal showed a level of insight and technical innovation that frankly wasn't present in the other bids, including Donnelly Precision's. We're excited to move forward with your firm. The contract wasn't as large as the failed Anderson project, but it was exactly what we needed: our first legitimate client respected in the industry, with enough revenue to sustain us and enough visibility to validate us." Word traveled quickly. The buzz about our win spread through engineering circles. I received messages from former clients, curious, congratulatory, and increasingly interested in working with us. 2 more engineers from Donnelly Precision submitted their resignations and asked to join us. 6 weeks after signing the contract, we delivered our first implementation milestone ahead of schedule and under budget. Henderson's leadership was thrilled. They sent us a glowing testimonial that we proudly placed on the homepage of our newly launched website. By then, our tiny office buzzed with energy. The walls still needed paint and the furniture didn't match, but the team was focused. The work was meaningful, and for the first time, I felt like I was truly building something of my own. Our core team of 7 engineers had formed something special, an atmosphere of true collaboration, trust, and innovation. We operated lean, but every member pulled significant weight, focusing not on churning out projects, but on delivering high-value, forward-thinking solutions. When Midwest Engineering Digest published a feature on emerging innovators and included Donnelly Tech Systems, I sat in stunned silence for a moment, not because of the recognition, but because for the first time, it felt like I had built something entirely my own. Not a branch of my family's legacy, not an inherited title, but a company shaped by my vision. And it wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. The same principles Aaron once labeled inefficient, deep R&D, experience leadership, long-term system thinking had become our greatest assets. Clients noticed, so did peers. And 3 months after launching Donnelly Tech Systems, I received an invitation to the annual Automation Industry Excellence Awards. Under different circumstances, I would have RSVP'd without hesitation. These events had always been vital for networking and brand visibility. But this year, I hesitated. I knew Donnelly Precision would be there. And with it, my mother, Aaron, possibly even my father. After discussing it with Marcus and Jessica, I decided to attend. Avoiding the event would only signal doubt or shame emotions I no longer carried. With the Henderson implementation ahead of schedule and 3 new contracts signed, I had earned my place. My company had earned its place. The awards were held at the Grand Plaza Hotel, familiar territory, from years of showing up on behalf of the Donnellys. This time, though, I arrived not as the daughter of the founders, but as the CEO of a rising competitor. Wearing a navy silk dress I'd actually taken time to shop for, I stepped into the ballroom with a calm I hadn't expected. I moved through the crowd with confidence, reconnecting with old contacts and meeting new ones. Several complimented our recent work. Others hinted at concerns with Donnelly Precision's direction, but I didn't indulge them. My company would rise on its own merits, not by tearing down anyone else, even if that someone was my own family. Then, just before dinner, it happened. I was discussing integration options with a software partner when I felt someone step quietly beside me. I turned, and there he was, my father. He looked older, tired. The sharp lines around his eyes were deeper, and his once assured stance now seemed hesitant. "Rachel," he said softly, "you look well." "Thank you," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. We were just discussing predictive maintenance capabilities. I was hoping we could speak privately, just for a moment. I offered a polite nod to my colleague and followed him to a quiet corner of the ballroom. As we stood apart from the noise and light, I saw the changes more clearly. He had lost weight. His shoulders had slumped, and for the first time in my life, my father looked uncertain. "I've made a terrible mistake," Rachel, my father said, skipping any formality. "The biggest mistake of my life." I said nothing. I didn't nod or prompt him, just let the silence hang between us. "I should have stood up for you," he continued, his voice raw. "I knew I've always known how valuable you were, not just to the company, but—" He trailed off, struggling. "But to me?" My breath caught, but I kept my voice steady. "Then, why didn't you?" He exhaled, shaking his head. "Weakness. Fear of conflict with your mother. Pressure from Aaron. None of it excuses what I did." Before I could respond, my mother appeared, her arrival sharp and sudden, with Aaron a half step behind her. Her smile was tight makeup, heavier than usual, a little smudged under the eyes. Aaron looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Rachel," she said with a nod that barely passed for polite, "I see you've established yourself quickly." "Yes," I replied coolly. "I have." Aaron forced a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Your little startup's making waves. Very impressive for a boutique operation." "Thank you, Aaron," I said smoothly. "We prioritize quality over volume. It seems to be working." My mother's composure faltered just slightly. The Anderson contract was canceled last month. I already knew industry news traveled fast, but hearing her say it aloud was something else. "After your departure, certain technical challenges proved insurmountable." I nodded. "I'm sorry to hear that." And I meant it. The engineers who'd stayed behind didn't deserve the fallout. "We've had other setbacks too," my father added, ignoring my mother's sharp glance. "The Henderson contract could have helped stabilize things." "I imagine it would have," I said, my tone even. I didn't apologize. I didn't gloat. I simply stated a fact. Aaron adjusted his tie, visibly squirming. "The thing is," "Rachel," he began, "we've been discussing the idea of collaboration." I raised an eyebrow. "Collaboration." A strategic partnership, my mother cut in, her business tone reasserting itself. Donnelly Precision has deep client relationships and infrastructure. Your firm offers certain technical capabilities we no longer possess. The offer, if it could be called that, was layered in implication. My mother wanted access to what they'd lost when they discarded me. My father seemed quietly hopeful. Aaron looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. And me, I was calm. I see, I said slowly. Well, I'm always open to conversations that serve mutual interests. My mother blinked, surprised. But let me be clear. I added, my voice firm but professional. Any partnership would be on my terms. I've built Donnelly Tech Systems from the ground up. I won't risk its integrity. A flicker of emotion passed across my father's face. Pride, maybe. Regret, certainly. For the first time in years, I felt the balance shift. Not from revenge, but from power earned. And finally, recognized. The truth hit with clarity. They weren't just floundering. They were in real trouble. Without my leadership, Donnelly Precision's engineering department had unraveled. Without the Henderson contract, their financial footing had weakened. And without a new flagship project to replace it, they were staring down potential collapse. What exactly are you proposing? I asked, eyes steady. My father stepped forward, voice quiet. We want you to come back, Rachel. Not as an employee, as a partner. Equal decision-making authority. Your name on the leadership board. Whatever terms you need. It was validating, and yet entirely absurd. They had once deemed me too expensive, too rigid, too technical. Now, standing at the edge of failure, they wanted the very foundation they'd so easily discarded. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully, but I've built something of my own now. Donnelly Tech Systems is growing. We're thriving. We're family. My mother interjected, her voice laced with emotion I hadn't heard from her in years. This company has always been about legacy. A legacy that fired me, I reminded her gently. You replaced 12 years of work with 3 junior engineers. Because I cost too much. Aaron looked down, guilt finally touching his expression. I was wrong, Rachel, he admitted. Jealous maybe of your connection with Dad, your technical authority, your place in the industry. I thought pushing you out would help me step up. His honesty was unexpected. And years too late. I've moved on, I said firmly. Donnelly Tech Systems isn't just a name, it's a mindset. We're building something new, agile, vision-driven, backed by people who value excellence over ego. My father's composure cracked. The company may not survive this. Rachel. Everything I built, everything we built, it's at risk. His words hit deeper than I wanted to admit. I had invested years into Donnelly Precision shaping its success. And many of its employees, good, hardworking people, had no role in my departure. If the company collapsed, they would be the ones hurt most. After a long pause, I offered an alternative. I won't return. I won't merge. But I would consider acquiring Donnelly Precision at fair market value, under strict conditions, including a complete restructuring. The look on their faces was almost comical. Acquire, my mother echoed, stunned. You can't possibly have the capital to I have investors who believe in my vision, I interrupted calmly. People who understand what this industry needs. Silence followed thick with disbelief. In that moment, I knew the power had fully shifted. I wasn't the overlooked daughter anymore. I wasn't the discarded director. I was a CEO with leverage. And for the first time in my life, they were asking me for a seat at the table I'd built without them. And your company's current market position likely makes the valuation quite manageable, I added. Aaron looked like he wanted to protest, but my father gently placed a hand on his arm, a silent signal to stay quiet. We should discuss this more formally, he said. Tuesday at 10 a.m., I replied, at my office. As I turned and walked away to rejoin the awards reception, a strange mix of emotions surged through me. Vindication, certainly, but also an unexpected sense of peace. The confrontation I had once dreaded and truthfully imagined countless times had come and gone. But it hadn't ended in bitterness. It had ended with clarity. The acquisition negotiations lasted 3 tense weeks. My mother resisted until the financials made it undeniable. Donnelly Precision could not survive without intervention. In the end, The final agreement kept most of the employees, but restructured leadership entirely. Aaron was moved into a non-executive business development role where his MBA and charm might finally prove useful without influencing operations. My father accepted a role as senior technical advisor, honoring his legacy while acknowledging that the company needed fresh direction. My mother chose to retire altogether, unable to accept a reduced role in the firm she once shaped. The new entity retained the Donnelly Tech Systems name, a decision grounded in both brand continuity and the symbolic acknowledgement of my journey from discarded employee to independent owner. The official announcement framed the deal as a strategic merger, emphasizing the complementary strengths of both firms and our shared commitment to innovation. The reality: it was a full acquisition and a rescue mission with me at the helm. Integration wasn't easy. Cultural clashes emerged particularly among managers loyal to the old regime, but most employees adapted quickly. Many expressed relief at leaving behind the dysfunction that had taken root after I was pushed out. 6 months after the acquisition, we celebrated the successful completion of the Henderson project with a company-wide event. Standing before a team that had grown from 7 to 43, I took a deep breath and stepped onto the small stage. A year ago, I believed my professional identity was inseparable from a company name that matched my own. When that connection was severed, I felt like I'd lost everything. I paused, scanning the crowd. My eyes landed on my father standing quietly in the back, his expression a complex blend of pride and remorse. But what I've discovered since then is this: our value isn't defined by the institutions we're tied to. It's defined by the integrity, creativity, and resilience we bring to our work. I continued, voice steady, heartful. This company isn't defined by a single founder or name. It's defined by our collective commitment to excellence. Every person in this room contributes to that identity, whether you've been here since day one or joined us through the transition. The applause that followed was thunderous, not just for me, but for what we had built together. Later that night, as the music quieted and the crowd thinned, Marcus found me on the balcony with 2 glasses of champagne. To the most expensive engineer who was worth every penny he toasted with a grin. I laughed, clinking my glass against his, to 2 very expensive lessons that turned out to be priceless. The journey from betrayal to rebuilding had taught me more than any technical certification ever could. It forced me to acknowledge my worth outside of legacy, outside of titles, outside of family expectation. Most importantly, it proved that sometimes losing everything you thought mattered clears the way for what truly does. Today, Donnelly Tech Systems continues to grow free from the constraints of the old ways. Our culture prioritizes innovation over tradition, collaboration over hierarchy, and excellence over expedience lessons, earned through hard personal experience. As for my family, that's still evolving. My father and I have slowly begun rebuilding our relationship this time as 2 professionals who respect each other. My mother keeps her distance. She still struggles with how the balance of power shifted. Aaron and I are civil, cordial even, but the trust we lost may never fully return. Yet none of that overshadows the greatest triumph of all. Not the acquisition, not the contracts, not the title. The real victory is personal. I faced betrayal and refused to let it define me. I turned it into fuel. In losing the family legacy, I found something far more powerful. My own. If my story resonated with you, even just a little, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What would you have done in my shoes? Your thoughts, your encouragement, and your perspective mean more than you know. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next chapter of this journey. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: never let someone else's definition of your worth become your own. Stand firm in your values, even when it's hard. Sometimes the best version of your life is waiting on the other side of loss.